My sister moved in to help after my surgery, but slept with my husband instead. After hiring an investigator, I exposed their affair to my family. My 28-year-old female world has been turned upside down over the last few months, and I'm still trying to understand all that has transpired. My husband Brian, 31, is a male, and my younger sister Sabrina, 25, is female. Brian and I've been married for 4 years. We met in college and I always believed we had a good relationship. We purchased our first home 2 years ago in a quiet community outside of the city. Brian works in IT, and I am a nurse at the local hospital. Sabrina has always been our family's golden child. She is the youngest of 3 children, and our parents, Helen, 55 female, and Noah, 58 male, have always treated her differently. Sabrina got away with everything while we were growing up. If something went missing, she was never to blame. Someone else must have caused the mess. Our eldest brother Isaac, 32, moved to another state after graduation and now rarely comes, which I better understand. The problem began 3 months ago, when I had to have emergency gallbladder surgery. The rehabilitation was expected to last a few weeks, but complications kept me bedridden for about 6 weeks. I couldn't lift large objects, couldn't drive, and required assistance with basic domestic duties. Brian originally took time off from work, but after a week, his employer began urging him to return. That's when our parents suggested Sabrina come stay with us and help out. She had recently finished her marketing degree and was between jobs, so the timing looked ideal. I was concerned at first because Sabrina and I had never been close, but Brian felt it was a fantastic idea. He explained that it would relieve him of stress and provide me with someone to chat to during the day. Sabrina arrived carrying 2 enormous luggage and quickly took over our guest room. She transformed it with her own images and plants, making herself entirely at home. At first, I felt grateful. She prepared meals, did laundry, and kept me company while Brian was at work. She would sit on my bed and tell me about her college pals and her dreams for a career in marketing. After the second week, however, things began to seem strange. Sabrina started wearing my clothes without asking. She'd shower with my costly shampoo and skincare goods. When I addressed it, she smiled and said, "What's the big deal? We're sisters." She also began rearranging items in the kitchen and living area, stating she was simply attempting to make things more orderly for me. Brian appeared to like her company more than I expected. He would come home from work and immediately start talking to Sabrina about his day. They would cook dinner together while I rested upstairs, and I could hear them laughing and conversing. When I joined them for meals, the discussion seemed awkward, like if I was interrupting something. One evening, around 3 weeks into Sabrina's visit, I went downstairs to get some water and discovered them watching a movie together on the couch. They were sitting closer than was necessary, with Brian's arm spread across the back of the couch behind Sabrina. When Brian noticed me, he hastily moved his arm, and Sabrina scooted to the opposite end of the couch. They both pretended nothing had happened, but the discomfort in the atmosphere was undeniable. I began to pay greater attention after that. Sabrina would always volunteer to deliver Brian's coffee in the morning before he left for work. She would text him throughout the day, ostensibly to keep him up to date on my condition, but their conversations seemed to go on for much too long. She began washing his laundry alongside mine, and I saw she was handling his things with apparent care, folding everything properly. The breaking point occurred during my 5th week of rehabilitation. I was now feeling better and began to move around the home more. One afternoon I decided to snooze and walked upstairs at 2 p.m. I couldn't sleep, so I came down an hour later for tea. As I entered the kitchen, I could hear conversations coming from the laundry room. I paused in the hall and listened. Sabrina said quietly, commenting on how difficult it must be for Brian to deal with everything. Then I heard Brian's voice speak quietly, emphasizing how much he loved everything she was doing, and how she made things simpler. There was a long silence, followed by what sounded like movement, as if someone was approaching someone else. I entered the kitchen and shouted out to see if anyone wanted tea. They both emerged from the washing room quickly, but Sabrina's face was flushed, and Brian appeared guilty about something. Sabrina claimed she was merely assisting Brian in troubleshooting a washing machine, but when I examined, it was functioning normally. That evening, Brian was especially attentive to me, bringing me food in bed and repeatedly asking if I needed anything. It felt forced, like he was trying to make up for something. Sabrina stayed in her room for most of the night, which was uncommon given that she usually spent her evenings in the living room watching TV. I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. Brian and Sabrina had created inside jokes and shared illusions that I wasn't aware of. They would start talking and then abruptly stop as I entered the room. Sabrina started cleaning the house incessantly, reorganizing everything to her liking and acting as if she was doing me a tremendous service. The final straw occurred on a Thursday evening during my 6th week of rehabilitation. I was feeling considerably better, and I proposed that Sabrina return to our parents' place soon. As I was almost back to normal, Brian and Sabrina quickly objected, claiming that I still needed assistance and that it was too soon for her to depart. Later that night, I awoke about midnight and discovered Brian was not in bed. I got up to look for him, assuming he couldn't sleep and was watching television. I searched the living room and kitchen but couldn't find him. Then I observed that the guest room door was locked, which was unusual because Sabrina generally slept with it slightly open due to her concern about being in strange locations. I remained in the corridor for a few minutes, listening. I could hear low voices behind the door, followed by what I recognized as Brian's laugh. My stomach sank. I returned to our bedroom and claimed to be asleep when Brian arrived about an hour later. He crept gingerly into bed, hoping not to wake me. The next morning, I told Sabrina that I felt much better and that she should probably go home for the weekend. She appeared worried and stated that she believed I still required additional assistance. Brian agreed with her, stating that we should not rush my recovery, but I persisted, and they both grudgingly agreed that she would leave on Sunday. That's when I decided to check Brian's phone. I'd never done anything like that before, but something told me I wanted to understand what was going on. On Saturday morning, as Brian was showering, I checked his messages. What I discovered made me sick to my stomach. Brian and Sabrina exchanged dozens of text messages within a few days of her arrival. They started out innocently enough, but rapidly became increasingly personal. Sabrina had been sending Brian photos of herself all day, not inappropriate ones, but selfies and shots of her cooking or cleaning. Brian had been complimenting her on how beautiful she looked and how much he valued everything she did. The messages increased from there. Sabrina wrote about how she had always thought Brian was too good for me, and she could see he wasn't happy in our marriage. Brian answered by claiming Sabrina understood him in ways I never did. They discussed how natural it felt to spend time together and how they wished things were different. The most recent messages came from the night prior. After I went to bed, they exchanged texts about how much they would miss each other when Sabrina left. Brian had wrote that the previous several weeks had been the happiest he had felt in years. Sabrina responded that she had been preparing to tell him how she felt for a long time, and that my operation provided the perfect occasion. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to my phone. Then I sat on our bed, trying to decide what to do next. My sister had planned to seduce my husband and took advantage of my medical issue. Brian had betrayed me with my own sister while I was recovering from surgery at our home. I chose not to address them immediately. Instead, I pretended that everything was fine for the rest of Saturday. I helped Sabrina pack her belongings and thanked her for all she had done. She hugged me farewell on Sunday morning and promised to see me again soon. Brian drove her to our parents' place, and when he returned, he appeared calm and distracted. It's been a week since Sabrina departed, and I'm trying to determine what to do with the knowledge I have. Brian has been seeming guilty and distant, and he is always messaging someone, but he is being more careful to hide his phone. I'm sure they are still in touch. I haven't informed anyone what I discovered since I am unsure who I can trust. Our parents adore Sabrina and have always supported her in every argument. My brother lives too far away to be of any assistance. I feel absolutely alone in this position. I'm not sure if I should face Brian directly, speak with Sabrina first, or tell our parents what occurred. Part of me wants to pretend I never read those messages and attempt to preserve my marriage, but I don't think I can live with the truth. I kept thinking about how they continued their emotional affair although I was bedridden and reliant on their assistance. Has anyone else faced a similar situation? I'm not sure what my next moves should be. Update 1. I never expected such a large response to my original post. Thank you to everyone who provided advice and support. A lot has transpired since my first post, and I wanted to give you all an update. After I first blogged, I spent approximately a week gathering additional proof. I realized that simply having screenshots of text exchanges wouldn't be enough, especially because Sabrina has always been adept at manipulating events to make herself appear innocent. I needed to be totally certain of what was going on before making any judgments. I began by generating a Google Voice number and a false social media profile. I utilized this to contact some of Sabrina's college pals and seemed to be organizing a surprise for her. These chats taught me a lot about my sister's history. Apparently, this wasn't her first time pursuing another person's partner or husband. One girl told me how Sabrina systematically ruined her relationship with her long-term boyfriend during their junior year by continually contacting him and showing up at his apartment with food and academic help. I also decided to conduct a more thorough inspection of our home security system. We have cameras at both the front and back entrances that record footage for 30 days. I reviewed the recordings from Sabrina's time with us. What I discovered was disturbing. On several times, I noticed Brian and Sabrina standing close together on our back patio, talking in an intimate manner. In one late-night video, I could plainly see them hugging for far longer than is suitable for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Meanwhile, Brian's actions became increasingly clear. He was continually checking his phone and smiling at the texts. He began working late more frequently, stating that his supervisor was assigning him extra projects. He also started criticizing me in ways he hadn't previously, commenting on my cooking, attractiveness, and energy level. It seemed like he was attempting to justify something to himself. 2 weeks after my original article, I decided to drive past our parents' house to see if Brian's car was still there. I had told him I was going to see a business acquaintance, but I ended myself parking down the street from my boyhood home. Sure enough, Brian's car was in the driveway. I waited for 2 hours, and when he eventually emerged, Sabrina led him to his car. They stood there conversing for a few minutes before she hugged him farewell. It was not a casual family hug. She placed her arms around his neck and hugged for at least 30 seconds. I confronted Brian that evening when he returned home. I informed him I knew he had been at our parents' place and questioned why he had lied about working late. He quickly grew defensive, accusing me of being paranoid and controlling. He explained that Sabrina had phoned him because she was having problems with her automobile, and he had come over to assist her with some technical concerns. When I mentioned that our father is fully capable of assisting with automotive problems, Brian stated that Noah was preoccupied with work, and Sabrina had explicitly requested his help. I knew he was lying, but I didn't admit I had read the text messages yet. Instead, I informed him that his conduct had altered during Sabrina's time with us, and I was concerned about our relationship. Brian became enraged and claimed that I was being unreasonable, and that my recovery from surgery had made me wary of everybody. He said Sabrina had been nothing but helpful, and I was ungrateful and anxious. The debate became heated, and Brian ended up staying in the guest room that night. He apologized the next morning, saying he was worried about work and didn't want to lose his temper, but his explanation about helping Sabrina with her car didn't make sense, especially since I knew from the camera tape that they had been spending time together on a daily basis. I've decided to hire a private investigator. I understand that sounds excessive, but I needed to know the entire extent of what was going on. I hired a PI that specializes in marriage investigations and comes highly recommended. I provided him all of the information I had and requested him to record Brian and Sabrina's actions for 2 weeks. The results were disastrous. The PI furnished me with images and comprehensive reports from Brian and Sabrina's meetings at several sites throughout town. They ate lunch together at restaurants, met at a park near our parents' house, and spent hours at a downtown coffee shop. The photographs show them holding hands, kissing, and acting like a couple. The most devastating evidence came from a motel parking lot. The PI had followed them there on a Tuesday afternoon, when I assumed Brian was at work. He had images of them entering the hotel together and exiting 3 hours later. In the images from their departure, they appeared relaxed and cheerful, walking close together with Brian's arm around Sabrina's waist. I also noticed that Brian was lying about his job schedule. The PI contacted his office and confirmed that Brian had been taking half-days and long lunch breaks on a regular basis over the previous month. His boss had expressed worry about his performance and spoken with him about his attendance concerns. When I received the PI's report, I spent an hour crying in my car in the hospital parking lot during my lunch break. For more than a month, my 4-year-old husband and my sister had been having an open affair. They had used my medical emergency and recovery to cover up their connection, and they had been lying to me every day. I resolved to inform our parents before facing Brian and Sabrina. I drove to their house on a Saturday morning, knowing Sabrina would be there. I brought printed copies of the PI's photographs and thorough report. When I stepped into our parents' living room, Sabrina was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, watching television. Our mother was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, while our father read the newspaper. It appeared to be a normal family situation, which made what I was about to do feel much worse. I asked everyone to sit down because I had something important to say. I began by recounting how I found Brian and Sabrina were having an affair. Sabrina instantly began crying and denied everything, claiming I was insane and paranoid. Our parents appeared bewildered and concerned. Then I showed them the photographs. The evidence was undeniable. Pictures showed Brian and Sabrina holding hands, kissing, and entering the hotel together. Sabrina's denials got increasingly frenzied, but the images spoke for themselves. Our father grew enraged, not at Sabrina, but at me for having them followed. He accused me of violating their privacy and claimed that hiring a private investigator was an extreme and unacceptable solution to marital issues. Our mother began crying, claiming that there must have been a misunderstanding. The most unexpected reaction came from Sabrina herself. After approximately 10 minutes of denying everything, she stopped crying and looked straight at me. She claimed Brian told her that our marriage had been finished for years and that he was going to divorce me anyhow. She stated that Brian had described me as frigid and unapproachable, and that he had never been truly satisfied with me. She went on to claim that she and Brian had a genuine connection and understood one another in ways that he and I couldn't. She stated that Brian had confided in her about how lonely he felt in our marriage and had considered leaving me long before my surgery. Our parents sat in startled silence as Sabrina continued to speak. She stated that she would not apologize for finding happiness with someone who genuinely liked her. She stated that Brian was the one who started their relationship and she attempted to resist at first, but their love for each other were too powerful. In that moment, I realized I'd never seen this side of my sister before. The sweet, innocent younger sister I thought I knew was vanished, replaced by someone who could betray her own family without remorse. Our folks weren't sure what to say. Our mother started crying, claiming she couldn't believe what was occurring. Our father appeared more concerned about the family's reputation than with the real betrayal. Neither of them protected me nor criticized Sabrina's actions. I left their place and headed home to wait for Brian. I had resolved to face him with everything I knew and inform him that I wanted a divorce. I was tired of trying to rescue a marriage that he had already shattered. Update 2. The confrontation with Brian did not go as intended, and what occurred next made me doubt all I thought I knew about my family. Brian went into the house that Saturday evening, after I had shown my parents the evidence, as if nothing had occurred. I was seated at our kitchen table, with all of the pie images spread out in front of me. When he saw them, his face turned absolutely white. I told him I knew everything and asked him to go. Brian stood there for a long time, staring at the photographs. Then he sat down across from me and began speaking. What he told me altered everything. According to Brian, the affair did not begin as I expected. He said that Sabrina had been contacting and texting him for months prior to my operation, frequently when she knew I wouldn't be present. She would interrogate him about our connection and make comments about how I didn't seem to value him enough. He said he initially thought she was just a concerned sister, but her texts became more intimate and sexual over time. Brian stated that he should have warned me about Sabrina's actions, but he didn't want to cause difficulties for me or my family. He understood how difficult my relationship with my parents might be, and he didn't want to further matters by whining about their favorite daughter. When my operation was set, Brian stated that Sabrina quickly offered to come stay with us. She told our parents that she was concerned about my rehabilitation and wanted to assist, but she had been privately texting Brian about how this would be an excellent opportunity for them to spend more time together. Brian claimed that he tried to make things proper while Sabrina was staying with us, but she was always looking for chances to be alone with him. She'd wait until I was napping or resting to start talking about how miserable she felt I was, and how she believed Brian deserved someone who valued him more. According to Brian, Sabrina initiated their first kiss. He claimed it happened in the laundry room the day I overheard them conversing. Sabrina had approached him and informed him she had been in love with him when they first met. Brian admitted that he didn't stop her from kissing him, which is when their physical relationship began. Brian stated he never told Sabrina that our marriage had ended, or that he intended to leave me. He claimed those were lies she told to excuse her actions to my parents. He stated that her attention had puzzled and impressed him, particularly during a tough period when I was healing and our house was chaotic. I asked Brian why he continued the affair after Sabrina left our home if he truly wanted to save our marriage. He claimed Sabrina had threatened to tell me that he had seduced her if he attempted to terminate things. She also threatened to inform our parents that Brian had taken advantage of her while she was staying at our house to assist with my rehabilitation. Brian gave me texts from Sabrina that corroborated his account of events. Sabrina was definitely the one seeking the relationship and making plans to meet. There were further messages in which she expressed how she had always wanted Brian for herself, and how she deserved to be happy even if it meant hurting me. However, the most disturbing messages were those in which Sabrina outlined her long-term ambitions. She had written to Brian about how she believed they should wait until after the holidays to tell everyone about their relationship, allowing people to adjust to the concept. She had also sent him texts on how she believed they should divide our assets and whether Brian thought I would agree to let them take the house. Brian told me that he had begun to suspect Sabrina had been arranging the situation for far longer than he had previously believed. He stated that some of her comments during her visit to our house made more sense now, such as when she mentioned that our guest room would make an excellent office space or advised improvements to our kitchen arrangement. I wasn't sure whether to believe Brian's version of events. On the one hand, the text messages he showed me corroborated his story. On the other hand, he had continued to participate in the affair and lied to me for weeks. I told him I needed some time to consider and requested him to wait someplace else while I determined what to do. Brian left to stay with his brother, and I spent the next week mentally reviewing our entire relationship. I recognized there were symptoms of Sabrina's inappropriate interest in Brian that I had overlooked or rejected. She insisted on sitting close to him during family dinners. She would make excuses to touch him while talking, placing her hand on his arm or shoulder. She always inquired about his profession and interests in greater detail than one might expect from a sister-in-law. I also remembered Sabrina making subtle comments about our relationship that I assumed were merely sisterly worry. She'd inquire if Brian and I were pleased or comment that Brian was worried. She had also made various comments over the years about how she believed Brian was too good for me, which I had taken as compliments but suddenly appeared menacing. While Brian was staying with his brother, I decided to conduct my own investigation. I contacted Sabrina's college roommate, whose name I discovered in some old social media posts. What this woman said disturbed me. Sabrina's roommate claimed she had a tendency to become enamored with other people's guys. She would investigate their relationships, learn about their interests, and then find ways to involve herself in their life. The roommate told me about at least 3 cases in which Sabrina successfully ended relationships by convincing the man that his partner did not appreciate him enough. The roommate also informed me that Sabrina had explicitly addressed me and Brian in college. She had shown her roommate images of Brian and discussed how she thought he was ideal for her rather than for me. The roommate stated that she had always found Sabrina's statements regarding my relationship disturbing, but she didn't know how to respond at the time. I also discovered that Sabrina had been questioning our parents about my marriage for years. She would express concern about Brian's happiness, or say she thought I took him for granted. Our parents had rejected Sabrina's comments as a concerned sister, but now I could see that she had been sowing seeds of doubt about my relationship for a long time. Armed with this new information, I resolved to address Sabrina directly. I drove to our parents' house on a Thursday evening, knowing she would be there. Sabrina was in her former bedroom, where she had been living since we moved out. I told Sabrina that I was aware of her history of targeting other people's relationships and had spoken with her college roommate. Sabrina initially tried to deny everything, but when I showed her the text conversations Brian had shared with me, her tone changed dramatically. Sabrina gave up pretending to be the innocent victim and became aggressive and defensive. She told me she had never understood what Brian saw in me, but she had always knew she was better for him. She explained that Brian had been unhappy in our marriage for years, and she had just recently given him the guts to admit it. Most shockingly, Sabrina said that she had been preparing to pursue Brian for a long time. She claimed my operation had been an excellent chance, but she would have found another way soon. She said that Brian had suppressed affections for her and that she had simply helped him recognize what he actually wanted. Our parents walked in during this talk and overheard Sabrina's confessions. Our father quickly began making excuses for her actions, claiming that she was young and made a mistake. Our mother began crying again, pleading with both of us to find a way to work things out as a family. But I was tired of preserving unhealthy family relationships. I informed my parents that Sabrina had purposefully targeted my marriage, and that Brian and I were divorcing as a result of her actions. I stated that I would not be attending any family parties or gatherings where Sabrina was present. Our father became unhappy with me for issuing ultimatums, accusing me of being dramatic. Our mother accused me of attempting to break the family over a mistake that could be forgiven. Neither of them appeared to see that this wasn't a mistake or a lapse in judgment, but a deliberate attempt to destroy my marriage. I left my parents' house that night, knowing that my connection with them was definitely ended. Sabrina had taken not only my husband, but also my parents and my sense of belonging within my own family. Update 3. I'm posting this final update because several individuals have asked about my divorce and family status. The last 2 months have been rough, but I wanted to relate how things ended. Brian and I went through with our divorce. Despite his assertions that Sabrina had manipulated him, I couldn't get over the fact that he had deceived me at one of my most vulnerable moments. Our divorce was finalized last week, and Brian has already moved in with Sabrina at our parents' home. While I was at work, our father helped him move his possessions out of our house, which I thought was cowardly but not unusual. We had been married for less than 5 years and did not have children, so the property division was uncomplicated. I kept the house since I could afford the mortgage payments on my own, while Brian stole the majority of our savings. He also accepted responsibility for his school loan and credit card problems. What struck me was how rapidly Brian and Sabrina's relationship deteriorated once they no longer needed to sneak around. Brian and Sabrina have been fighting continuously since he moved into our parents' house, according to my brother Isaac, who still speaks with our parents on occasion. Apparently, the reality of their situation differs significantly from the ideal they built throughout their romance. Sabrina expected Brian to be thankful and romantic, but he appears disgruntled of how the scenario happened. Brian appears to blame Sabrina for driving him into a relationship he wasn't ready for and for losing his marriage before he knew what he really wanted. Sabrina, on the other hand, expected Brian to be entirely committed to her, but he has been reclusive and grumpy since moving in. Our parents are struggling with having both Brian and Sabrina residing in their home. Our father has been moaning to Isaac about the tension and drama, and our mother is fatigued from attempting to maintain the peace. What they assumed would be a temporary arrangement until Brian and Sabrina found their own homes lasted weeks with no end in sight. I've had no contact with Sabrina or our parents, and my interactions with Brian have been limited to divorce paperwork. Brian has attempted to contact me several times, stating he wants to apologize and explain his behavior, but I have not responded to his messages. I've also blocked Sabrina from all social media platforms and altered my phone number. The most difficult thing has been losing contact with our parents. My mother periodically calls my new number, but I do not answer. She leaves voicemails begging me to come home for supper or to call her back, but I am not prepared to have that talk. Our father has made no attempt to contact me, which both hurts and does not surprise me. I've been working on restoring my life and job. The hospital where I work has been really supportive throughout this scenario, and my boss even helped me switch to a different shift so I wouldn't have to worry about running into Brian while he was picking up Sabrina from somewhere. I've also been working to enhance my relationship with Isaac. He and his wife Camilla have been quite supportive, and they have invited me to join them for the holidays. Isaac acknowledged that he relocated across the nation to get away from our family's dysfunction, and he's been instrumental in validating my decision to cut off communication with our parents and Sabrina. I learned from Isaac that Sabrina had lost the marketing job she had finally acquired. Apparently, her employer learned about her role in breaking up my marriage through mutual contacts, and they determined she wasn't a suitable fit for their workplace culture. Our parents are currently financially supporting her while she hunts for a new job. I've also learned that numerous members of our extended family have taken sides in the situation. The majority of our aunts and uncles have been supportive of me, particularly after understanding the circumstances of what transpired. Our grandma on our mother's side has been particularly vocal about her dissatisfaction with Sabrina's behavior and our parents' reaction to the matter. Brian is no longer present in the house, therefore it feels more tranquil. I redecorated numerous rooms and converted Brian's office into a reading space for myself. I've also started asking friends around more frequently, which I rarely did when Brian and I were married. I'm not sure I'll ever be ready to reconcile with either our parents or Sabrina. The betrayal feels too deep, and their reaction to the circumstance demonstrated how little they valued me in comparison to Sabrina. Our father's instant support of Sabrina, as well as our mother's attempts to minimize what happened, demonstrated that they will always place Sabrina's comfort over my well-being. Some have urged that I contemplate forgiveness for my own peace of mind, but I'm not ready just yet. Right now, I'm focusing on creating a life that does not revolve around attempting to gain acceptance from individuals who have never truly valued me. I have been dating someone new for the past month. Lucas is an instructor whom I met through a mutual buddy at work. He is aware of my divorce and family situation, and he has been patient and compassionate regarding my trust difficulties. It's good to be with someone that values me without any games or manipulation. Looking back, I can see that my marriage to Brian would not have survived even without Sabrina's intervention. We had drifted apart over the years, and neither of us had made an effort to continue our relationship, but I'll always be bitter about how it ended and the role my own sister played in destroying everything we'd worked for together. I have no regrets about hiring a private investigator or addressing everyone with the evidence I acquired. Some may think it was extreme, but I needed to know the truth and have proof that couldn't be disputed or manipulated. Without that evidence, Sabrina would have continued to play the victim, and our parents would have made excuses for her actions. I'm sharing this tale to let other individuals who may be in similar situations realize that they're not crazy to suspect betrayal, especially if it includes family members. Trust your instincts and don't allow others tell you that you're being paranoid when something feels strange. I also want people to understand that cutting off communication with toxic family members is sometimes the healthiest option, even if it is painful and lonely. I'd rather be alone than spend my life attempting to gain love and respect from individuals who would never offer it to me. That is where things stand right now. I'm going on in my life, and I'm finally beginning to feel optimistic about the future.